Welcome to Dyspraxic Rosie Writes, a channel where we talk about dyspraxia, chronic illness, and the writing life. At the time of filming, you're joining me in January, which is the start of Thyroid Awareness Month. So what better opportunity than to finally share with you my own story and experiences as a member of the thyroid patient community. My experiences as a thyroid patient start at the end of 2023. I was feeling this form of almost disabling tiredness, and it just felt off. It wasn't a type of tiredness that one feels after a long night out or pushing it too hard at sports or after jet lag or anything we are all familiar with. This was one where I would feel a very, very disabling form of tiredness, more like exhaustion after doing tasks like putting the kettle on or sitting down for long periods of time or walking for long periods of time. And how I knew something was off was that I had experienced this feeling before as someone who was, prior to that, hospitalized for anemia. That was the anemia itself was around the time when I was a teenager. I very much became familiar with the huge difference between tiredness that everybody experiences and tiredness that prevents the capability to carry out everyday tasks. And the second one I mentioned was very much what I was feeling at the time. So that's when I decided to seek some medical support. The part of that that felt particularly intimidating was that I didn't really have great access to a doctor at the time, but I made my decisions on who to go to based on the fact that a local doctor here had done an amazing job at supporting my husband when he had some issues with his back that were quite severe for him and needed some medical attention in itself. And, I remembered that experience. So I decided to go in and try registering myself as a patient and go and explain to her this unusual and off-putting tiredness that I was experiencing at the time. So I told her about what I was experiencing, and I told her about my history of anemia. I told her about that I was neurodivergent, and we narrowed down a few other things that can relate to that tiredness, including, the usual thing of me just being a lady, the menstruating lady. And what we found is that there was no way could be anemia because I wasn't quite ticking the boxes of the common things that caused, which was rather strange for me because I was feeling exactly the same. So it was very much a sort of surprise and unknown for me. And then she happened to have in her office an ultrasound machine. And she was like, well, could it be your thyroid? And I was like, well, my thyroid? Not that I know of. I mean, at the time, I had a friend who had gone through a bit of an endeavor with thyroid cancer herself. So immediately my instinct was to panic. Not long after that, I went and got some medical tests. I went with my husband because all this was really new and overwhelming to me, and I didn't feel like I could navigate it completely on my own. And so there were blood tests to see that it wasn't anemia. And then I went to the one that I was really, truly worried about, which is a biopsy. For those of you who are unfamiliar with what a biopsy is, a biopsy basically looks at something that is a source of concern around part of the body that they are trying to determine if it is cancerous or not. So the process they use to figure this out is quite brutal. So they put a very thin needle in the part that you have the maybe cancer, maybe not thing in your body, and they kind of twist it around and get little samples of it in order to test it in the lab. I won't go into that gory detail in case some of you have particularly sensitive stomachs, but that is sort of the basic idea of it. And I think because of some of my sensitivity issues, the first one I had ever was particularly difficult. I didn't know what to expect, and I guess I was particularly sensitive to the sensation of it because I reacted with a bit of an anxiety attack. That's the best thing I can possibly describe it as. But in the end, they got the process done, and I had to wait a long time. Well, not that long, but it felt like a while because, as you would expect, it's quite threatening to wait around and find out if you have cancer symptoms or not. And so the waiting began. So when you're tested for symptoms of cancer, when they go and take your biopsy results to the lab, it is basically a scale of 0 to 4. The 0 meaning, that's fine, nothing's going on. And no, I correct that. It's 1 to 4. So 1 is no cancer. You're all good. 3 is we'll examine this further. And 4 is actual cancer. 3 was what I had. So that is a very real need for further examination because it's pre-cancerous. And so the news was broken to me that I would need thyroid surgery. I didn't know if it was going to be partial or full removal of thyroid, but at the time that was a very hard question to reflect on. And as the waiting process started to figure out exactly what we were going to do, at the time it was pretty close to Christmas, and we were scheduled to go back to Canada as we usually do in December, as we just finished doing now. And as Canadian citizens, we can get the public health care there. So rather than getting all this done in Morocco, where we were at the time and where this case was found, we figured it would be a good idea to go back and access the public system that we pay into as tax-paying citizens and go and see specialists to see if it was in any ways possible to get a surgery over the holidays and get a second opinion on exactly what results have been provided to me. And so we went back to Canada, and it was a long process of getting off of the plane. And it seemed like at that point in time, there was one appointment after another. And we got in a little quicker because my husband happened to know a doctor that, as a result of his profession, had some professional connections. But in the end, that didn't really speed up the process as quickly as we hoped. And that was really frustrating. I felt myself getting sicker and sicker. I really did. I mean, my energy was really bad. And I was just really drained and not really feeling the whole holiday spirit thing all that much that year as a result. Everything was just a day by day process of hoping for the best that I could get that surgery spot, that somebody had a result from it so that I could get to the next step, could do the surgery within a reasonable amount of time. By then, my thyroid issues had gotten a little bit worse, and they did another ultrasound with that surgeon in the room once we returned, and they had found that it had grown a lot and gotten much bigger, and that rather than debating, do we remove one side versus the whole thing, an entire thyroidectomy would be necessary, essentially just medical ease for removing the entire thyroid. And luckily he had the surgeon had some surgery spots in quite soon, and there was a bit of flexibility, and I feel quite fortunate in that case. And he was like, oh, well, should I just do the operation tomorrow? And we had arranged for my mother to come for a visit soon after. And so we waited, and it turned out pretty soon after she came to visit, they could get me in for surgery. There's a bit of an adjustment process after you're diagnosed of starting to plan your medication around meals, to figure out how much time you need between your medication. And really, you have to get used to figuring out whether or not you have to allow multiple hours between certain medications, and medications don't intersect very well with thyroid medication. And although I would say that the biggest key to thyroid patient quality of life is that of access to a general practitioner with some understanding of thyroid issues, and ideally what's called an endocrinologist that deals with hormone deficiency related conditions. So the same thing that people with diabetes would get, for example, the same specialist. But if that is not possible, at the very least, you're getting your tests regularly, and you're taking them to the doctor, and you're reporting anything that seems rather unusual about how your body is reacting to medication, or if you feel like you've had significant lifestyle changes that may have changed how your body interacts with the medication. And the one thing ever since that I felt like I have to look out for is that is stress. It's really changed my entire relationship with how I spend time and how I exercise kindness with myself when I do particularly energy draining tasks. And so stress management is a big thing that adds a little bit of variety in how you manage your thyroid condition. Alrighty, so as promised, I'm going to show you what is called levothyroxine. In places like North America, here you go. I take one of these a day, and at the beginning of when you go on this medication, there is a bit of a trial and error process in order to find what dosage makes the most sense to you. So some people might need 100 milligrams, some people might need less than that, some people might need more than that. And in some cases, it's a different brand entirely. Although I was pretty damn lucky. I guess my body really just needed the exact default amount of 100 milligrams Just a side note, if you are diagnosed in North America, then you are more likely to be on what's called Thyroid, which is another brand of thyroid medication. Although you may, in fact, end up with Levothyroxine as well, which is the generic brand. So how they monitor you with that is that you are blood tested. You are measured in terms of your thyroid hormone levels. Every once in a while, you go to a lab, you get your test to measure your thyroid hormone levels. And the process itself is kind of brutal. Well, it feels brutal for a second because basically, before the thyroid hormone test, you have to fast and not have your breakfast in the morning, and you can't have your medication in the morning. So as a result, you're definitely not your best, and the best and most optimal time to get that test is in the morning rather than later on in the day, so that it doesn't become a pain in the ass to navigate other meal-oriented activities. So I hope you found that helpful. And if you want to learn more about thyroid-related diseases, a person within this community who I feel is a great spokesman for that is the Invisible Hypothyroidism newsletter, which I will link to in the description of this video. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, any source of curiosity. This condition is enormously common in women, especially in some cases men, but more so women. In sort of like, from what I found in studies, approximately it's been around 30-something to 40-something are a median age for diagnosis. And the commonality of this condition is huge. And we really need to, within our healthcare systems, see how we can break the equality barriers that thyroid patients have to accessing their medication, and also follow-up care to make sure that their medication is really truly continuing to work in their lives. Happy reading, happy writing, my friends. Hope you enjoy. And of course, like and subscribe if you found this video particularly helpful, and share with a friend who might find it helpful.